The NFL free agency, 3 winners I have. One of the biggest winners for me is the Cleveland Browns. And here's why. You have the Browns last year, obviously, they won the offseason, right? They fire, Hugh Jackson. Obviously, they don't bring back Greg Williams. And then you hire Freddie Kitchens, who is the quarterback coach. And then after the head coaching firing, he was the offensive coordinator with Baker Mayfield. Baker liked him. Baker vouched for him. Baker got him. Freddie Kitchens is the head coach. He traded for Odell Beckham Jr. And now all of a sudden, the Browns really win the offseason because they have a few sexy signings and a few big names to go on that roster. And we obviously know what happens. A lot of hype. They won if there was a Super Bowl Lombardi Trophy for offseason hype, the Browns won that last year. And obviously, we know on the field it didn't work out. But this year, again, I mean, they are one of the hyped and most talked about teams at least in this first week of free agency. And there's a good reason why. And I think at least the hype now is worth it because they signed players that actually fit the needs that they have. They signed Jack Conklin from the Tennessee Titans, 3 years, $30 million. He's 25 years old. And more importantly, if you watch the Browns last year and watch why they struggled, obviously you can put a lot of blame on Baker Mayfield. But I think because of, or in part due to Baker's struggles, was the offensive line being very poor. Very, very poor. And you kind of saw last year what happens if you focus on all the shiny objects, right? If you focus on all the sexy positions, the tight end, the running backs, the wide receivers, and you think, all right, if I have enough there with the quarterback, we'll be fine. Everything else will just work its way out. Well, obviously you saw the offensive line was a big hindrance for the Browns. At least they ensure that up by signing Conklin, which is huge. You have a young offensive tackle you can plug in there, and he will be solid in the run game and the pass game, and at least really give Baker some extra time. So huge signing for the Browns. They also signed tight end Austin Hooper from the Falcons, and that's huge too because now you have a new head coach, Kevin Stefanski, coming over, was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings. He's a big tight ends guy. When he was with Minnesota, he used tight ends a lot. And now at least you have Austin Hooper pair him with David Njoku, who has a lot of talent, is very athletic, does get injury prone, has a tough time staying in the field. So at least now you have some insurance policy, and when both of those are healthy, 2 weapons at the tight end position that are tough to guard, on top of having Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. out there. So now at least you're starting to cater and build the team towards the way your offense is built with the head coach in mind, and building through the offensive line, which they need because God knows if you don't have an offensive line, you really don't have a chance no matter who the quarterback is. Andrew Luck saw that with the Colts for a while. Deshaun Watson right now is going through that. You need an offensive line no matter how dynamic the quarterback is, no matter how athletic they are, mobile they are. If you don't have a quarterback if you don't have an offensive line and your quarterback is running for his life every single play, you may have some success. I mean, the Texans went to second round of the playoffs. They improved their offensive line this year. It still wasn't great. It wasn't mediocre like it was, but it still wasn't great. And you see at least now the Browns really addressing a need that they have. And also they signed a few veteran defensive players. They're going to need some help in the draft. But at least they're building in the right way. They identified their needs. And again, instead of really going for the shiny object, instead of going for the big name, they focused on building their team through the needs that they have. And again, especially with the line play, offensive, defensive lines, they address both of those. And if they can get some pass rushers or linebackers in the draft, that'll be a big win. So at least for me, the Browns, especially with the Jack Conklin signing, I would make that a big win because, again, they need offensive line help. Number 2, and this is a team that I kind of talked about where I don't think they'll win this year, but I think they're a big winner because of the progression that they're showing and the direction that they're heading. And that's the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, last year, it was really a tale of two halves because the first half of the season, I honestly thought the Dolphins were going to go 0-16 and have a chance to be statistically the worst team in NFL history. Through the first 4 games of the year, so a quarter through the season, they were on pace for the most points allowed, for the worst point differential. They were on pace to shatter records that you don't want to be shattering when you're that low and that bad. I really, really thought there was no way they'll win a game. I really thought that they were going to, forget the Lions who went 0-16. This is a chance, and this is a team. I forget the Browns who went 0-16. They can be even worse than those teams because of the way they're getting beat down, the way they're trading off anyone with any sort of value in the offseason and the first few weeks of the year. They're giving away talent, accumulating draft picks. And now, at least for me, the tide has changed. You saw Brian Flores, the second half of the year, really turn this team around, have his team buy in, and they started playing competitively. Even if they weren't winning games, they were playing tough. They were playing hard. They got impressive road wins at Indianapolis late in the year, at New England the last game of the year, which is more important because now you see the Patriots lost that opportunity with the loss to get a bye, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs next week. They played hard, tough-nosed football and really went and bought into Brian Flores and what he did. And now at least I like that the Dolphins are sort of taking that momentum. And again, they were still bad. They still finished in last place. And they still won't be good this year. But they're taking that momentum they finished with last year, and they're really starting to now at least give Brian Flores a chance to win. They are not outwardly saying, we don't want to win. We're going to do our best to race to the bottom, and we're going to do our best to basically be as bad as possible to get draft picks. They've basically done that already. And now at least you've seen free agency with a few players that they signed, they're starting to now turn the ship around. They're done with tanking. They're done with giving away assets, and they're starting to collect assets. They signed Byron Jones, at the time before Darius Slay beat it, was the highest paid corner in the league. So now you sign Byron Jones, who was the top cornerback on the free agent market. You pair him with Xavier Howard, who's already locked down. Those are two solid corners in a league that, as we know, loves to throw the ball and loves to pass the ball. So you have two really, really good corners. So you're already solidifying a strength that you have on the team. And now you start to address major needs that you have. Last year, as we mentioned how bad the Dolphins were, they were last in sacks. What did? They signed 3 different defensive linemen, try to get after the quarterback in Kyle Van Noy, Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah. I know there's some sort of skepticism and hesitancy to sign players from New England, but at least Brian Flores coming over there a year before, leaving that system, having familiarity with a player like Kyle Van Noy, I think it'll work out. You see many times that players go chase the money once they leave New England and their production goes down. They're not worth the money, and they kind of struggle wherever the new place is. I think Kyle Van Noy not be one of those guys. He's very versatile, too, on defense, which is nice. So Brian Flores has some flexibility. And, again, for a team that was last in sacks last year, 3 different signings this week to at least address the pass rush, address the defensive line, and try to get some pressure after the quarterback. Offensive line, one of the worst in football. What a surprise. They at least make some short-term fixes, nothing long-term. They sign Eric Flowers and Ted Karras, but at least those 2 signings are kind of like a bridge, right? If you're an organization trying to rebuild, let's say the Panthers, when they signed Teddy Bridgewater, they used Teddy Bridgewater as a bridge quarterback, for lack of a better word, no pun intended. They want Teddy Bridgewater to be the guy, just play competently, play decently until the franchise guy comes around in the draft, either this year, next year, 2 years from now, whatever. A bridge guy. Good enough to get the job done, good enough to hold the fort down, per se, but he's not the long-term answer. That's what at least these 2 signings with Flowers and Karras do. So the offensive line, again, you're starting to turn it around and start at least to solidify some pieces, especially considering the Dolphins have the number 5 overall pick. They want to take a quarterback, especially if they want to take Tua Tagovailoa. You need to give Tua time. As you see, the biggest question is not about Tua's talent, it's about his health. Obviously, he got hurt every year at Alabama, the 2 full years that he was a starter. Obviously, he has that very scary hip dislocation that he seems to be, if not completely healed from, almost completely healed from, and is on a path to where he should be completely healed by the time the season rolls around in September. But you can't draft Tua and then toss him in front of an offensive line, similar to what you had last year, because he was going to get hurt, and you're going to stunt his growth. So at least with these 2 signings, again, short-term fixes, not long-term, but a year, 2 years, just to hold down the fort. While you draft other guys, while you bring in younger players to kind of get them developed, it's a good way, at least now that the Dolphins are finally starting to turn around and find some short-term answers and try to be competitive. And finally, they addressed the running game because God knows that we already talked about how bad their offensive line was and how bad their pass rush was. You probably couldn't have a worse running game in the NFL and maybe NFL history than the Dolphins did last year, and here's why. Do you know who their leading rusher was last year? Not even a running back, just leading rusher. If you're unfamiliar, it was Ryan Fitzpatrick, their quarterback. He was the leading rusher last year with 243 yards. I mean, come on. You can't, especially in this day and age, when throwing the ball is so prevalent, when you throw the ball to, basically it's a throw-first league. You know, there used to be the old expression, the old thinking with the NFL, is that you run to set up the pass, and that's how you really keep teams on their toes. And once you establish the run game, everything else opens from there. Really, in this day and age, in today's football, it's the other way around. You pass first. You put teams on their heels by throwing the ball, and when they start now to drop back, put 7, 8 guys in coverage when you run the ball. So safe to say, you don't want Ryan Fitzpatrick being the guy leading your team in rushing yards. Yet he did that, 243 yards. So they signed Jordan Howard, who's a pretty good signing. I mean, started off with the Bears, last year was with the Eagles. I mean, he's only 25 years old. And we'll get to the running back market later on because there is a concerning trend that's happening. And at least now there's only, in terms of running backs, there's only really two ways you could sign him. So I want to get into that. But Jordan Howard, 25 years old, and since he came into the league back in 2016, he has the third most rushing yards. He's not really that sexy, big time, break off, exciting kind of runner. But he's ground and pound, who'll get you the hard yards, and he will just keep his legs going. He's had third most rushing yards since 2016. So another short-term fix, short-term solution that is starting to at least give the Dolphins and insulate them with some talent here. So now Brian Flores, the great coaching job he did last year, is starting to have some talent around him to actually try to start winning. Not to mention, now you look at what they did in the free agency. I know we're just kind of at least grading these teams based on what they did the first week of free agency. But the reason why I'm including the draft in here is because the Dolphins have 5 picks. 5 picks in the first 2 rounds, including 3 first-round picks, 14 overall. And the reason why I want to include at least the draft picks with the Dolphins is because they are starting to already address certain needs that they had last year. And especially with the offensive line and the running game, they're doing it through short-term fixes. Now you can afford to take chances, draft multiple players at different positions to try to develop them to where in a year or 2 years or 3 years they can take over for these short-term fixes and really start to build a core nucleus of young players that can go and compete. Especially if you can this year, hopefully this year, maybe even next year, sign a quarterback to put in that nucleus to grow with these young players. So that's why at least I'm a big fan of what the Dolphins are doing. I don't think they'll win this year. Maybe if they go 6-10, it'll be a pretty good year. It'll be a really good year for them. But at least to me, they're in the right direction. They made a few signings that show that they are at least ready to start developing and start turning around the ship in Miami. Rewarding Brian Flores for the great coaching job he did. And at least I'm at least excited to see the direction that Miami's going. And finally, the third winner for me, Buccaneers. I mean, 2 words you have to say about the Buccaneers, Tom Brady. And while they haven't done any other moves yet, I think the Tom Brady signing, at least, and you already saw it, I'm sure after reporting it last Thursday, the Tom Brady signing opens the Buccaneers up to be a destination. Already, he said, a large amount of free agents reached out to someone in Tampa Bay to express their interest in playing with Tom Brady. So now all of a sudden you had Tampa Bay, which 2 weeks ago, last week, 5 days ago, 6 days ago, before it came out that Tom Brady was going to Tampa Bay, I'm not really sure there's a long line of free agents knocking on the door of Bruce Arians and the GM Jason Licht to die to come play for the Buccaneers, really give their services, do whatever it takes to be a member of the Buccaneers. 5 days later, you sign a guy named Tom Brady. All of a sudden now, not only do players want to come there, your team is very relevant because all of a sudden now you look at that schedule when you're going against Patrick Mahomes, when you're going against Aaron Rodgers, when you're going against Drew Brees, when you're taking on your former defensive coordinator and Matt Patricia and Matthew Stafford there in Detroit. The Buccaneers are going to be a lot of primetime games. They're going to be on the national schedule a lot. And all of a sudden now, those 425 games that you're so used to seeing the Packers, the Cowboys, the Patriots, the Buccaneers, you're going to be seeing them a lot on that CBS or that Fox game. The Buccaneers will be in your living room a lot these next 2 years. And that's a huge bonus for them. And not to mention, too, just by the addition of Tom Brady, that means you're subtracting Jameis Winston, which we talked about on Monday leading up to what, free agency about Jameis Winston and his free agent stock and who's interested or not. Jameis Winston's pretty bad. So at least there's an addition straight up by a subtraction by taking Jameis Winston, taking his 30 interceptions and throwing them out the window. I wrote an article this week about Tom Brady, kind of hitting on what I talked about on Thursday, where there'll be a lot of fun, a lot of weapons, a lot of great matchups, but will they win? And one of the things I found doing my research is, obviously we talked about Jameis Winston. He threw a record 7 pick sixes last year. 7 pick sixes, including the last pass he ever threw as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, which is just very fitting as they lost the last game of the year on the last pass that Jameis Winston threw of his Buccaneers career. But outside of those 7 picks, 16 other interceptions that Jameis Winston threw occurred in Tampa Bay's own end. So while the defense was really bad in terms of scoring defense, I think they allowed the 4th most points in the NFL last year, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, quick math here. 16 and 7, 23. 23 of the 30 interceptions either directly led to points or put the defense on the field for the other team being close to the end zone to score points. So just by taking most of that away, I mean, you're not going to say that Tom Brady won't throw an interception or won't throw a pick 6, but he won't throw 23. I could promise you that, to where the defense has kind of their backs up against the wall and in a tough position to succeed. So just by that fact alone, Tampa Bay's defense should improve just by bringing Tom Brady along, not to mention their offense. And again, relevancy and being a destination. Now, the Buccaneers were huge, huge, huge winners in the first week of free agency.